Mr. President, thank you for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with the debate. You and your team have said you had a bad night, but your friend Nancy Pelosi actually framed the question that I think is on the minds of millions of Americans. Was this a bad episode or the sign of a more serious condition?
It was a bad episode. No indication of any serious condition. I was exhausted. I didn't listen to my instincts in terms of preparing, and I had a bad night.
You know, you say you were exhausted, and I know you've said that before as well, but you came, and you did have a tough month, but you came home from Europe about 11 or 12 days before the debate, spent 6 days in Camp David. Why wasn't that enough rest time, enough recovery time?
Because I was sick. I was feeling terrible. Matter of fact, the docs with me, I asked if they did a COVID test because they were trying to figure out what was wrong. They did a test to see whether or not I had some infection, a virus. I didn't. They just had a really bad cold.
And did you ever watch the debate afterwards?
I don't think I did, no.
Well, what I want to get at is what were you experiencing as you were going through the debate? Did you know how badly it was going?
Yeah, look, the whole way I prepared, nobody's fault, mine. Nobody's fault but mine. I prepared what I usually would do, sitting down, as I did come back with foreign leaders or the National Security Council, for explicit detail. And I realized about partway through that, I get quoted, the New York Times had me down at 10 points before the debate, 9 now, or whatever the hell it is. The fact of the matter is that what I looked at is that he also lied 28 times. The way the debate ran, not my fault, no one else's fault. No one else's fault.
But it seemed like you were having trouble from the first question in, even before he spoke. Well,
I just had a bad night. You've had some bad interviews once in a while. I can't remember any, but I'm sure you did.
I've had plenty. I guess the question, the problem is here for a lot of Americans watching is you've said, going back to 2020, watch me, to people who are concerned about your age. And, 50 million Americans watched that debate. It seemed to confirm fears they already had.
Well, look, after that debate, I did 10 major events in a row, including till 2 o'clock in the morning after that debate. I did events in North Carolina. I did events in Georgia. Did events like this today. Large crowds, overwhelming response, no slipping. And so I just had a bad night. I don't know why.
And how quickly did it come to you that you were having that bad night?
Well, it came to me as having a bad night when I realized that even when I was answering a question, even though they turned his mic off, he was still shouting. And I let it distract me. I'm not blaming it on that. But I realized that I just wasn't in control.
But part of the other concern is that this seems to have fit into a pattern of decline that has been reported on recently. New York Times had a headline on July 2nd, Biden's lapses are said to be increasingly common and worrisome. Here's what they wrote. People who have spent time with President Biden over the last few months or so said the lapses appear to have grown more frequent, more pronounced, and after Thursday's debate, more worrisome. By many accounts, as evidenced by video footage, observation, and interviews, Mr. Biden is not the same today as he was even when he took office 3.5 years ago. Similar reporting in the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal. Are you the same man today that you were when you took office 3.5 years ago?
In terms of successes, yes. I also was the guy who put together a peace plan for the Middle East that may be coming to fruition. I was also the guy that expanded NATO. I was also the guy that grew the economy. All the individual things that were done were ideas I had or I fulfilled. I moved on.
Of course, that's an excerpt of George's interview with the president. And joining me now is ABC News senior congressional correspondent Rachel Scott. Rachel, glad to have you with us.
Thanks, Kareem.
We saw a defiant president tonight, doubling down in many ways. How is this playing with all of your sources tonight?
Democrats were on edge, Juju, when they were watching this in real time. This is arguably one of the most important interviews that President Biden has done in his entirety of his political career. So a little bit of a mixed bag tonight. But what I'm hearing from Democrats is that no, the president didn't do as bad as he did necessarily on that debate stage, but that doesn't mean that things are going to take a sharp turn in the right direction for him, that the momentum is going to continue to grow. One thing that I heard from one Democrat right after that interview ended, they said the word denial. They said that they felt like the president was really in denial about the polls, about the direction that this race is headed in, and that though he cares about the stakes, he's not really coming to grips with what it means for him to stay in the race and continue on. Another thing that I heard today is that the common denominator, one Democrat told me, is that this has to do with age. And that is something that the president is not going to be able to change.
And you have been reporting extensively on what's going on behind the scenes on Capitol Hill. We have one prominent senator, Mark Warner, gathering colleagues to talk about it. And Hakeem Jeffries is going on what you called a listening tour.
Yeah, he's really in listening mode at this point. And trust me, he is getting an earful from House Democrats. They are not happy. And a lot of this also has to do with the fact that Democrats do have a good chance of taking back the House in November, but they know that having a president at the top of the ticket will affect how well they do and their possibility of actually clinching back the majority. So a lot of them have concerns about that. They've been back home, they're out on recess, they're listening to their constituents, and they're not liking what they're hearing. And so they're relaying those concerns back up to Jeffries and asking him to somewhat intervene here. On the other side of this, over in the Senate, this is really notable because Mark Warner is the chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee. He is a serious voice over on Capitol Hill, taken very seriously within the Democratic Party. So the thought that he is now coming forward and trying to gauge whether or not there is a consensus among Senate Democrats to ask the president to step aside is absolutely notable, Juju.
And clearly, House Democrats like Mike Quigley are saying that it's not enough to say, I'm going to give it my best. That if this is an existential threat, that's not good enough.
That answer will get a lot of play, I think, in the coming days, and it's one that Democrats are really keeping in mind because they say that the threat is so high here. Is it really enough to say at the end of all of this, you gave it your best if you don't defeat Donald Trump?
Rachel Scott, thank you. And we know you'll be busy all weekend long for ABC. Thanks.
Thanks.
Now, the Trump campaign already seems to be stepping up their attacks on Vice President Kamala Harris, painting her as a possible challenger. Earlier tonight, I talked to ABC News chief White House correspondent Mary Bruce and asked her whether the Biden campaign was able to put this horse back into the barn or if it's too late.
That is certainly the question of the night. I mean, the Biden team certainly is hoping that this interview, along with his public appearances and his plans for the next coming days, will be enough to right this ship. And of course, the Trump campaign, no surprise here, they are relishing this moment and all of the attention and questions about the president's age and mental fitness and acuity. But look, the Biden campaign is hoping that if they can just stay the course, that this too shall pass. They really do feel very strongly that this is all being overblown, that the president has been underestimated before, that he has shown that he can come back and win. And they think that this is just another one of those times. But what you also heard from the president there was the fact that he didn't really seem to fully grasp the magnitude of this situation, just the severity of the growing chorus of concern that we have been hearing from Democrats. The president dismissing a lot of that, dismissing the trends that we have seen in the polls. So this moment, what was a moment the campaign certainly feels the president did well tonight. The question is, will it be enough going forward?
Well, expand on how the White House is reacting, because in many ways, a lot of people are saying that he didn't push back enough. How are they responding to the interview tonight in that context?
They're responding with just one word, and that is strong. They feel that the president did what he needed to do to come out and answer these questions. He, as you noted, admitted, yes, look, I had a bad night. The issue is that what you're hearing from Democrats is that they're not worried that he had a bad night. They are worried about the president's ability to do this job for another 4 years, and perhaps more importantly than that, his ability to win. And the president didn't really want to hear any of that. You know, when George pushed him and said, what will you do if Democratic leaders come to you and say, we really feel that you need to step aside, that we have a better chance of defeating Trump without you at the top of the ticket. And the president sort of joked that only the Lord Almighty could make him step aside. But the question is really, the president and those Democrats that are pushing back, they have the same goal here, right? They want to defeat Donald Trump. They just clearly disagree over the best person to do that.
Well, Mary Bruce in Delaware on this very busy news weekend in the summer. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
And Georgia's exclusive interview with President Joe Biden will air in its entirety on ABC's This Week, Sunday morning.